There are roughly 30 years of Jesus of Nazareth's life, about which the Gospels say almost nothing. Think about the size of that silence. 4 accounts, written by people who believed this man was the most important figure in human history. And between the child in the temple and the man at the river, there is one story. One. A single episode, 12 verses long, and then the text simply stops and picks him up again as an adult. For most of Christian history, that silence has been treated as an embarrassment, a gap to be filled, a problem to be solved. Whole books were invented to plug it. And that is exactly the wrong way round, because the silence is not empty. We know a great deal about the world those years happened in. We know the village, the trade, the language, the taxes, the roads, the political weather. We know what a boy in that place at that time would have learned, and roughly when, and from whom. This video is about the missing years, not by inventing stories, but by walking into the world that produced him. Because when you see that world clearly, the man who walks out of it at 30 stops being a figure suspended in stained glass and becomes something far more interesting. A working man from an unimportant village who had spent 3 decades watching, in close-up, exactly the kind of life he would later spend his ministry talking about. Start with the silence itself, because its shape tells you something. The 4 Gospels do not agree on where to begin. Mark opens with a grown man walking to a river. He has no interest whatever in the childhood. John begins before time with the Word. Only Matthew and Luke give us the birth, and only Luke gives us anything at all from between. That is the first thing worth noticing. 2 of the 4 evangelists apparently saw no need to explain where he came from. The story they wanted to tell started when he was already a man. And Luke's single episode is not a childhood anecdote in the way we would write one. There is no first word, no first steps, no charming detail of the kind a family remembers. It is one scene at one festival when he is 12 years old, and we will come back to it because it is doing a specific job. Now consider what filled that vacuum later. Within a century or 2 of the Gospels, other texts appeared, infancy Gospels, so called, and they are a revealing read. In one of them, the boy Jesus makes birds out of clay on the Sabbath and claps his hands and they fly away. In the same text, he curses a child who bumps into him, and the child falls down dead. He strikes a teacher blind for correcting him. These stories were popular for centuries. They shaped medieval art, and no church ever accepted them as scripture. Set those beside Luke's restraint, and you learn something about the canonical Gospels. When people invent a childhood for a divine figure, this is what they produce. Miracles as party tricks, power without character, a boy who is essentially a small god playing with mortals. The Gospels, we have refused all of it. Their silence is not an oversight, it is a discipline. So if the text will not tell us what he did, let us find out where he did it. Nazareth in the early 1st century was not a town. It was a hamlet in the hills of Lower Galilee. And the archaeology is fairly consistent about its scale, somewhere in the region of 200 to 400 people. A few dozen families, terraced hillside, agricultural plots, rock-cut cisterns and storage pits. Houses of rough basalt and limestone, with courtyards shared between households. There is no evidence of any public building, no theatre, no bathhouse, no colonnade, no inscriptions. There is not, so far as anyone has found, a paved street. It appears in no Old Testament text, no Jewish historian, no Roman source of the period. Josephus, who commanded in Galilee and lists dozens of its settlements, never mentions it. That is the place, and you can feel the reputation of it inside the Gospels themselves. In Nathanael's question, when he first hears the name, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That line is not hostility. It is the perfectly ordinary contempt of a person from a slightly larger place for a village nobody has heard of. And this is the detail that reshapes the whole picture, Nazareth was not isolated. Walk about 4 miles northwest, an hour on foot over the ridge, and you arrive at Sepphoris. And Sepphoris, in exactly these years, was the largest building site in Galilee. Here is why. When Herod the Great died around 4 BC, Galilee erupted. A rebel named Judas seized the royal armory at Sepphoris. Rome's response was total. The legions came north, the city was taken, and according to Josephus, its population was sold into slavery. Then Herod's son, Herod Antipas, the same Antipas who will later execute John the Baptist, made Sepphoris his capital and rebuilt it from the ground up. So through the entire period in which a boy in Nazareth is growing into a man, there is a Greco-Roman city rising over the hill. Colonnaded streets, a theatre, mosaics, administration, a mint, aqueducts. An elite that spoke Greek and dressed like Romans and collected taxes from the countryside. Nobody can tell you that Jesus worked there. No text says so. But consider the situation plainly. He was a craftsman in the building trades. The largest construction project within a day's walk ran for most of his working life, an hour from his door. Whether or not he ever set foot in it, he grew up beside the machinery of Roman client kingship being poured into concrete on the next hill, and he grew up on the side of it that paid. It is worth being concrete about what that city was, because the contrast is the point. Sepphoris had a theatre cut into the hillside, seating thousands. It had colonnaded streets, public buildings, water brought in by aqueduct, and later some of the finest mosaic floors found anywhere in the region. It had Greek and Roman dress and administration, and the kind of wealth that comes from being where the taxes are counted rather than where they are paid. An hour's walk away, a hamlet of a few hundred people with no paved street and no public building of any kind. That is not a metaphor. That is the actual geography of Lower Galilee, and a boy in Nazareth grew up inside it. Whatever he understood about wealth and power, he did not learn it from a book. He learned it by looking over a ridge. And the political weather around that city is worth naming too, because it is the same weather that eventually kills him. Herod Antipas ruled Galilee for more than 40 years, the whole of these missing decades. He was a client ruler, holding his position at Rome's pleasure, building cities to flatter his patrons. Later, he would build an entirely new capital on the lake and name it Tiberias, after the emperor. Later still, he would arrest and execute John the Baptist. And when Jesus is finally brought to trial, Luke has him sent to Antipas as part of the proceedings. The man who was rebuilding the city over the hill during Jesus' childhood is the same man standing in the room at the end of his life. Galilee was small in that way. There is one more geographical fact worth holding. Galilee was not a backwater in the sense of being cut off. Major trade routes ran through the region, linking the Mediterranean coast to Damascus and the east. Caravans, soldiers, merchants, and imperial officials moved along them. A village in the hills was poor and obscure, but it was not sealed. News arrived. Foreigners passed. The wider world was close enough to see and far enough to have no interest in you, which is its own particular education. Which brings us to the trade, and to a word that has been quietly mistranslated in the popular imagination for a very long time. Mark's Gospel calls him a tekton. Matthew calls him the son of a tekton. In English, that has come down to us as carpenter, and carpenter conjures a workshop, a bench, a man making furniture and toys. Tekton is broader than that. It means a builder, a craftsman, an artisan who works with hard materials, wood, certainly, but stone as well. In a landscape where houses were basalt and limestone with timber roof beams, and where wood was comparatively scarce, a tekton was closer to what we would call a jobbing builder than a cabinet maker. Doors, roof beams, plows, yokes, thresholds, door frames, agricultural tools, and the endless small repairs a village needs. That matters for a simple reason. A builder does not stay in his workshop. He goes where the work is. He deals with people who owe him money and people who cannot pay. He knows which fields are being sold, which family is in debt, which landlord is taking what share. He works alongside, day labourers hired in the morning for a day's wage. The exact figure who turns up in his parables again and again, standing in the marketplace at the 11th hour, waiting for someone to hire him. You do not need to speculate about the missing years to see them. They are all over the teaching. The man talks constantly about wages, debts, tenants, absentee landlords, harvests, storehouses, building on rock versus sand, and the cost of finishing a tower you have started. That is not the vocabulary of a scholar who has read about ordinary life. It is the vocabulary of someone who has spent 30 years inside it. Now the economics, because they are harsher than the Sunday school image of a quiet village childhood. Galilee was fertile and productive, and most of its people were poor. The land supported grain, olives, figs, vines, and a substantial fishing industry on the lake. But the surplus flowed outward and upward, to Antipas, to the temple system, and to Rome. Layered taxation was the ordinary condition of life. Tribute to Rome, taxes to Antipas, tithes and offerings to the temple, tolls on goods moving along the roads. For a small-holding family, one bad harvest could mean borrowing. Borrowing could mean losing the land. Losing the land meant working someone else's, as a tenant, and eventually as a day laborer with no land at all. That was the slide, and it was happening across Galilee throughout this period as estates consolidated. Hold that beside the teaching too. Forgive us our debts. The parable of a servant thrown into prison over what he owes. A steward frantically rewriting the accounts of his master's debtors. Those images did not need explaining to a Galilean audience. They were describing Tuesday. So, a small village, a building trade, a hard economy. What about the mind? What did a boy in that world actually learn? 3 languages sat in that landscape at once, and it is worth separating them. Aramaic was the everyday tongue, the language of the house, the site, the market. It is the language the Gospels occasionally leave untranslated when they want you to hear his actual voice. Talitha kum, Ephatha, Abba, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Hebrew was the language of Scripture and the synagogue. It was not the vernacular, but it was heard constantly, in reading and in prayer, and any male participating in synagogue life would have absorbed a great deal of it. And Greek was the language of administration, trade, and the cities, including the one over the hill. How much Greek a Galilean craftsman had is genuinely debated among historians, and it likely depended on how much he dealt with the cities. Anyone in the building, trades in that region would have needed some. Education, meanwhile, ran through the synagogue and the family, and it was not education as we would recognize it. There was no schoolroom curriculum of the modern kind. There was oral repetition of the scriptures, week after week, year after year. Hearing the Torah and the prophets read aloud and discussed, until large portions of it sat in memory rather than on a page. Literacy rates in the Roman world were low, and estimates for first-century Jewish Galilee vary widely. The honest answer is that we do not know how many people could read. But we do know that this was a text-centered culture that transmitted its texts by ear. And Luke shows him at the beginning of the ministry, standing up in the Nazareth synagogue, being handed the scroll of Isaiah, finding the place and reading it aloud. Whatever the general rate, the Gospels present a man entirely at home in the Scriptures. Someone who argues from them fluently, quotes them from memory in tight corners, and expects his audience to catch a reference from half a line. That fluency was built somewhere. It was built in those 30 years. Now the family, because there is more in the text than most people realize. Mark's Gospel, at the moment the people of Nazareth take offense at him, gives us a roster. Is this not the tekton, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joses and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? 4 brothers named, sisters unnamed and unnumbered but present, plural, and evidently living locally. Whatever you make of the later theological arguments about who exactly those siblings were, and the churches differ, the picture the text gives is of a large household in a small village, everybody known to everybody. And there is a silence inside the family too. Joseph is present in the infancy narratives and in the temple episode. He is absent from the ministry, absent from the crucifixion, absent everywhere Mary appears alone. The text never says he died. But the shape of his absence, and the moment at the cross where Jesus places his mother into the care of a disciple rather than a family member, has led most readers, ancient and modern, to conclude that he died sometime before the ministry began. If that is right, it changes the texture of those years considerably. The eldest son of a village craftsman, with younger siblings, in a household that has lost its father, in an economy with no safety net. Whatever else those decades were, they were probably years of responsibility. And there is an arc buried in that family list that most people never notice. During the ministry, his brothers do not believe him. John's Gospel says so flatly. Mark records a moment when his family come to take charge of him, because people were saying he was out of his mind. Whatever 30 years of living in the same house had produced, it was not conviction. And then, after the crucifixion, James, one of the 4 brothers named in that Nazareth crowd, becomes the leader of the church in Jerusalem. Paul lists him among those the risen Jesus appeared to, and later describes going up to Jerusalem and meeting him as one of its pillars. Josephus records his death there in the early 60s. Follow that line. A man grows up beside his brother in a small village, watches him work as a craftsman for 3 decades, thinks he has lost his mind when he starts teaching, and ends up leading the movement and dying for it. Something happened between those two positions. The Gospels are explicit about what they think it was. But even setting the question of belief aside, the trajectory itself is one of the more striking things in the historical record. The family that did not believe him produced the leader of the church in the city where he was executed. One more thing about the years themselves, why they ended when they did. Luke says he was about 30 when he began. In that culture, 30 carried weight. It was broadly the age of maturity for public and priestly responsibility, the point at which a man's words carried authority rather than promise. A teacher of 20 would have been dismissed. A working man of 30 who stood up in the synagogue and read Isaiah was doing something the culture had a category for, even if what he then said blew the category apart. So the timing was not arbitrary, and the waiting was not idleness. It was, on any reading, deliberate. Which finally brings us to the one story we have. Luke sets it at Passover, and the setting deserves unpacking, because modern readers picture a family outing, and it was nothing of the sort. Passover pilgrimage meant traveling from Galilee to Jerusalem, somewhere around 80 to 100 miles, depending on the route, several days on foot. Nobody made that journey alone. Villages traveled together in a caravan of relatives and neighbors, with children moving freely among the adults of an extended community that had known them since birth. And Jerusalem at Passover was not the quiet city of a nativity scene. Pilgrims poured in from across the Jewish world, and the population swelled enormously for the festival. The temple, rebuilt by Herod on a colossal scale, was the largest sacred precinct in the Roman world. A platform of some 35 acres, with courts, colonnades, and the constant noise and smoke of sacrifice. For a boy from a village of 300 people with no public building at all, arriving there would have been the single most overwhelming sight of his life. He is 12. On the return, a day into the road, his parents realize he is not among the company, which is not negligence, but a natural consequence of how such caravans moved, with children assumed to be somewhere among the group. They go back, they search for 3 days, and they find him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening and asking questions. And everyone who hears him is astonished at his understanding. Then his mother says the most human line in the Gospels. "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." And he answers, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house?" Sit with that exchange, because Luke has chosen it out of 30 years for a reason. Mary says your father, meaning Joseph. He says my father, meaning someone else. Those two words sit next to each other in the same conversation, and the whole distance the gospel is trying to travel is in the gap between them. And then, this is the part people forget. Luke says they did not understand what he meant. Not the shepherd's certainty, not the Magi's worship. Incomprehension in his own family. And then he goes home. He goes down with them to Nazareth, Luke says, and was obedient to them. And that is it. That is the whole of the record between infancy and the Jordan. He was 12, he stayed behind, he was found, he went home and did as he was told. Luke closes with a single summarizing line, that he grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man, and the curtain comes down for 18 more years. So what do we actually have? We have a man who spent roughly 9/10 of his life doing nothing that anyone thought worth writing down. Working, paying tax, attending synagogue, repairing roofs, burying in all likelihood his father. Being, as far as his neighbors were concerned, entirely unremarkable. And we know they found him unremarkable because of what happens when he comes back. When he returns to Nazareth as a teacher and speaks in the synagogue, the reaction is not awe, it is offense. Where did this man get all this? Is this not the tekton, the son of Mary? Are his brothers and sisters not here with us? They are not asking a question. They are making a point, and the point is, we know exactly who you are. We know your family. We know what you charge for a door. You have no business speaking like this. Mark records the result in a line that is almost startling in its bluntness, that he could do no deed of power there, except lay his hands on a few sick people. He was amazed at their unbelief. Familiarity did that. 3 decades of being the ordinary man from the small village meant that when he finally spoke, the people who knew him best were the least able to hear it. Which is, in the end, what the missing years are for. Consider what they rule out. They rule out the idea that this figure descended into the world as a visitor and passed through it untouched. Whatever else the Gospels are claiming, they are not claiming that. They are describing someone who did the work, decades of it, in an unimportant place, under occupation, in an economy that ground people down, in a family that at times did not understand him, among neighbors who would eventually take offense at him. There is a line in the letter to the Hebrews that reads differently once you have looked at those 30 years. We do not have a high priest unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tested as we are. That is not a poetic flourish. It is a claim about a specific working life in a specific village in Lower Galilee between roughly 4 BC and AD 27. And notice the proportions the Gospels leave us with. 3 years of ministry, 30 years of ordinary life. 9/10 of it in obscurity. If those decades were merely a waiting room, dead time before the real thing started, then the Gospels wasted 9/10 of the story. The traditional Christian reading is the opposite, that the ordinary years were not preparation for the meaningful part, they were themselves meaningful. That a life can be almost entirely unremarkable and entirely significant at the same time. Which is, if you think about it, the only version of this story that is any use to anyone. Almost nobody gets 3 years on a public stage. Almost everybody gets 30 years of work, family, obligation, and obscurity. The Gospels are not embarrassed about the silence. They simply decline to fill it, and in declining, they leave the largest part of the life exactly where most of us live. Scripture and sources. This account draws on the Gospel of Luke, chapters 2 and 4, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, and the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, on Josephus for the revolt at Sepphoris and the rebuilding of the city under Antipas, on archaeological survey work at Nazareth and Sepphoris, and on standard scholarship on the term tekton, Galilean economy and taxation, and the languages of 1st century Palestine. Where the record is genuinely uncertain, whether Jesus worked at Sepphoris, how much Greek he spoke, general literacy rates, when exactly Joseph died, this account says so rather than choosing the tidy answer.